Welcome back to Wisdom Unveiled. We're on episode 24.
24 already. Wow.
I know, right? Time flies. Anyway, today we're diving into Iranian philosophy.
Oh, cool. Through what lens, though?
Well, we've got this series of conversations, Murfat, with Dr. Dinani and Dr. Larijani.
Interesting. So what are we focusing on specifically?
We're going to try and tackle the one and only Rumi today.
The poet, Rumi. That's going to be fascinating.
Yeah, you know him for his incredible poetry, right?
Yeah.
But, and this is kind of wild, his pen name was actually Silence.
Silence. That's so interesting, especially for a poet. Is that like a paradox or something?
Exactly. It's like he's acknowledging that even words, even for a master like him, can't fully capture, the really huge mystical experiences.
I get that. Like, have you ever tried to describe a dream you had? It never quite gets the feeling across, does it?
Totally. Or like when you see something unbelievably beautiful and you just can't find the words.
It's a universal experience, that struggle to express the really big emotions, the awe. And Rumi was grappling with that, especially when it came to like the divine, that realm beyond our normal understanding.
Okay, so if Rumi, a genius with words, struggled with this, how are we supposed to even begin to understand his work? Where do we start?
Well, Dr. Dinani suggests we need to engage more than just our brains, our intellect. He talks a lot about intuition, what he calls divine madness.
Divine madness, that's a powerful image. But doesn't logic still matter?
It does, but has limits. Logic's like a map, great for familiar territory. But when you're exploring uncharted lands, like mystical experiences, you need a compass, something that guides you through intuition, through feeling.
Okay, so divine madness, like when you lose yourself in music or dance, totally absorbed in something larger than yourself. But how do we find that in Rumi's work? Any examples?
Absolutely. Dr. Larijani points to Rumi's reed flute metaphor. You see, he compares the human soul to this flute, separated from its source and always yearning to go back.
That's such a beautiful image. Like we long for connection, for something more.
Right. The flute needs breath to make music, and we need connection to the divine for true fulfillment.
So reading Rumi intellectually isn't enough. We have to let his words, resonate within us, awaken that longing in our own souls.
And that's where action comes in, like Dr. Dinani always emphasizes. Thought without action is inert, he says. You can't just contemplate Rumi's poetry. You have to let it inspire you to live differently, to act differently, with compassion and understanding.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's putting these insights into practice. But how do we avoid, performing actions that don't really reflect real inner transformation?
Both Dr. Dinani and Dr. Larijani warn us about Qiyas. You know that story about the parrot who spills oil and gets punished? Then he sees a bald man and thinks he must have spilled oil too.
I love that story.
It's funny, but it shows how we judge based on surface appearances without getting the full context.
Totally. Like, don't judge a book by its cover. We might think someone's spiritually advanced based on what we see, but true depth comes from aligning our thoughts, words, and actions with a higher purpose.
Exactly. And this brings us to positivism, Dr. Dinani's term for overemphasizing the tangible, the measurable, while ignoring deeper meaning, especially in mystical texts.
It's easy to get caught up in the material world, the things we can see and touch, but Rumi's pushing us to look deeper, to explore the unseen, the spiritual.
Absolutely. And it requires humility, being open to the possibility that there's more to reality than what we can measure.
This idea of balancing intellect and intuition is fascinating. It's like Rumi's inviting us to use our whole being in the search for meaning. But how do we balance intuition with critical thinking? How do we avoid going too far?
That's a tricky balance. Dr. Dinani talks about developing discernment, being able to tell the difference between genuine intuition and wishful thinking. Pay attention to your inner compass, but also be willing to question your assumptions and biases.
So it's about being critically aware of our inner landscape, recognizing that intuition can be influenced by our past, our fears, our desires. But how do we actually do that? How do we cultivate that kind of discernment?
Dr. Larijani points out something really interesting. Rumi used language to evoke a state of being in the reader, not just to convey information. He used words to create an experience, to transport us to another realm where logic takes a backseat to feeling and intuition.
Wow. Like, his poetry is a portal to another dimension. But how does he do that?
Rumi was a master of weaving together repetition, imagery, and metaphor. He created this tapestry of meaning that resonates on so many levels, bypassing the intellect and speaking directly to the heart.
It reminds me of how Dr. Dinani and Dr. Larijani talk about fauna, the annihilation of the self in the divine. They say Rumi uses repetition and imagery to create like a sonic representation of this dissolving of the ego, this merging with the beloved. For our listeners who might not be familiar with fauna, can you unpack that a bit?
Of course. In Sufism, fana refers to the state of complete absorption in the divine, where the individual self merges with ultimate reality. It's a transcendent state where the ego dissolves, and you experience this profound sense of unity and interconnectedness.
That's powerful. It's like Rumi's using language to create a soundscape that mirrors spiritual transformation. But, translation can be tricky. Don't we risk missing some of the subtleties, the nuances in translated versions?
Absolutely. Dr. Larjani warns us that while the core themes shine through, some of the wordplay, cultural references, the musicality of the language can be lost.
It's like trying to explain a joke in another language. Sometimes it just doesn't translate.
Exactly. And that's why approaching Rumi with humility is key. We need to acknowledge that our understanding might be limited, especially with translations, but we can still benefit from his wisdom. It's about being open to the mystery, to the possibility that there are deeper layers of meaning we might not immediately grasp.
So it's not just understanding the words, but feeling them, letting them resonate within us, and being open to the mystery.
Precisely. It's about letting Rumi's words touch our hearts, awaken our souls, and guide us on our own journey of self-discovery.
This is all so inspiring, but also a little overwhelming. It's one thing to talk about these concepts, but how do we actually apply them in our daily lives? How do we bridge the gap between these lofty ideas and our everyday experiences?
That's a great question, and it's something we'll definitely explore further in the next part of our deep dive. Dr. Dinani and Dr. Larjani offer some really practical techniques for integrating these teachings into our lives. They talk about cultivating presence, practicing gratitude, and opening ourselves to the power of unconditional love.
I can't wait to hear more. This is giving me so much to think about.
It truly is transformative stuff. Rumi's wisdom has the power to change the way we see ourselves, the world, and our place in it.
So we've been talking about how understanding Rumi goes beyond just thinking about it, right? We need to engage our intuition, our emotions, our whole selves. But honestly, I'm still a bit stuck on how to apply this to my life. It's profound stuff, but where do I even start?
That's a really common question, and a good one. Dr. Dinani has a really practical starting point: presence. He really emphasizes that it's not just mindfulness, It's about bringing your full attention to everything you do, even the everyday stuff.
So like really paying attention when I'm doing the dishes or chatting with a friend, even just breathing.
Exactly. It's about finding the sacred in the ordinary, seeing the divine in every moment, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant.
It makes me think of that quote, "The wound is the place where the light enters you." Like even in pain and struggles, there's opportunity for growth. How does presence help us see those opportunities, though?
Well, when you cultivate presence, you kind of shift your perspective. You move from focusing on what you don't have to appreciating what you do have. It's a shift from scarcity to abundance.
That makes sense. So presence is about shifting our focus, opening ourselves up to a bigger way of seeing the world. And you mentioned gratitude earlier. How does that fit in?
Dr. Dinani talks about gratitude as this transformative force. It helps us move away from that lack mindset towards abundance. Instead of focusing on what we don't have, we start appreciating what we do. It's like Rumi said, wear gratitude like a cloak and it will feed every corner of your life.
It's easy to get caught up in what we're striving for, the things we think will make us happy, but Rumi's reminding us to appreciate the now, the simple things.
Exactly. And it's not just about feeling grateful inside, it's about expressing it too. Rumi used poetry to express his appreciation for life, for creation, and we can do it in so many ways through art, music, kindness, even just saying thank you.
It's like gratitude is a muscle you can work out. The more you use it, the more abundance and joy you feel. It reminds me of that story Dr. Dinani tells about the man who prayed for 60 years, but his only concern was that he needed a donkey to graze on God's grass.
It's a funny story, but it shows how we can miss the point, focusing on what we want instead of connecting with the divine.
So, presence and gratitude, two essential practices for connecting with Rumi's wisdom. What else helps bridge the gap between these teachings and our daily lives?
Well, Dr. Dinani also emphasizes love. And we're not talking about just romantic love, but something much bigger.
You mean unconditional love? That all-encompassing love that embraces everyone, that sees the divine in all beings.
Exactly. It's the kind of love that shines through in Rumi's poetry. A love that transcends boundaries, that sees unity and diversity, that embraces the light and shadow in us and others.
That sounds beautiful, but so hard. How do we cultivate that kind of love in a world that feels so divided?
Dr. Dinani says it starts with ourselves. It's about loving ourselves unconditionally, accepting our flaws and imperfections, recognizing that we're worthy of love just as we are.
Easier said than done, right? We're
Yeah,
so hard on ourselves.
true. But it's so important. How can we love others if we don't love ourselves? It's like you can't pour from an empty cup. Fill yourself up with love first.
So self-love is the foundation for unconditional love.
Exactly. And that means forgiving ourselves, letting go of past hurts. Holding on to anger just creates more suffering.
Like carrying around baggage, weighing us down. Forgiveness is about letting it go, freeing ourselves to move forward with love and compassion.
Beautifully put. And it's not just about forgiving ourselves, it's about forgiving others, too. Recognizing that everyone's on their own journey, we all make mistakes. Holding on to anger hurts us more than anyone.
Like the saying, forgiveness is a gift you give yourself. Choosing peace over pain, love over resentment. A truly liberating act.
Exactly. And Dr. Dinani also talks about letting go of attachments, the things we cling to that keep us from true freedom and joy.
Like material possessions, status, even our ideas of who we are.
All those things, yes.
It's
Things we identify with, things we think define us. True freedom comes from realizing we're more than our possessions, roles, identities.
It's about letting go of the ego, that sense of separation, embracing the interconnectedness of all things, just like Rumi teaches, surrendering to the divine, to love, to the flow of life.
Precisely. It's recognizing that we're all part of something much bigger than ourselves.
This is all so inspiring. I'm starting to see how Rumi's teachings can apply to my life, how they can help me handle the ups and downs with more grace. But it still feels daunting. Cultivating presence, gratitude, forgiving, letting go. Where do we even begin?
Remember, it's a journey, not a destination. And it's a journey worth taking because it leads to deeper understanding of ourselves, the world, and the divine.
It's like that idea of polishing a mirror. The more we work on ourselves, the clearer the reflection becomes.
That's a great way to put it. It's a process of refining, letting go of what doesn't serve us, and embracing our true nature, which is love. Just like Rumi said, what hurts you blesses you.
So it's not about being perfect, but about embracing the journey, the imperfections, the challenges, and using them for growth.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that the journey itself is the destination.
This is truly life-changing stuff. I feel like I'm just starting to grasp the depth of Rumi's wisdom.
And this is just the beginning of your exploration. There's so much more to discover, so much more to experience.
I can't wait to dive deeper. These insights are opening up so many new perspectives.
That's fantastic. It's about taking those small steps, those daily practices, and letting them gradually change our way of being.
So not drastic changes overnight, but incorporating these practices bit by bit, letting them slowly reshape our hearts and minds.
Exactly. Cultivating a way of life rooted in presence, gratitude, forgiveness, and love. And remember, you're not alone on this journey. Rumi's wisdom is a gift for everyone, and his words can guide us no matter where we are on our path.
This deep dive into Rumi has been incredible. I'm so grateful for these insights. But before we wrap up, I'm curious, what about silence? We talked about the limits of language, but how can silence be a path to understanding?
That's a great question. Dr. Dinani and Dr. Larijani talk about this a lot. They say Rumi silence isn't just about not speaking, it's about cultivating inner stillness, being open to something beyond words.
So quieting the mind, creating space for deeper knowing.
Precisely. It's about moving beyond the ego's chatter, the constant thoughts and judgments, and connecting with that quiet inner voice.
That sounds challenging in our noisy world. We're constantly bombarded with information, stimulation, distractions, like our minds are always racing.
It's true. But that's exactly why cultivating silence is so important. It's creating a sanctuary within, a space to reconnect with our true nature, with the divine.
Makes me think of meditation, being in nature, or even just taking a few deep breaths to clear the mental clutter.
All wonderful practices for cultivating silence. It's about finding what works for you, what helps quiet your mind and open your heart.
So silence isn't about escaping the world, but experiencing it more fully, more deeply.
Beautifully said. It's about shifting from doing to being, from external noise to inner wisdom.
It reminds me of that story about the king who asked his wise men for something to make him happy when sad, and sad when happy. They brought him a ring that said, "This too shall pass."
What a powerful reminder of impermanence. Cultivating silence helps us hold that awareness, not get carried away by life's ups and downs, but find that inner peace.
Like finding the eye of the hurricane, the calm amidst the storm.
Exactly. And that stillness is where we connect with our true selves, the divine, the interconnectedness of everything.
This has been such a rich, deep dive into Rumi. I feel a new appreciation for language, intuition, and the power of silence.
It's been a joy exploring this with you. Remember, it's just the beginning of your journey with Rumi. His words are a gift that keeps on giving.
I'm excited to keep exploring, peeling back those layers of meaning. But before we go, any specific practices Dr. Dinani or Dr. Larajani recommend for cultivating silence?
They both really stress meditation, finding a practice that works for you and sticking with it. They also talk about being in nature, connecting with its beauty and stillness.
It makes sense. Nature has a way of quieting the mind, reminding us of the vastness of it all, like Rumi's poetry come to life.
Exactly. It's about finding those spaces where we can step away from the noise and just be.
This has been an incredible journey. I feel so grateful for these insights. I'm ready to embrace the silence and see what unfolds.
That's wonderful. Remember, the journey itself is the destination.
This has been Wisdom Unveiled. May Rumi's words light your path, and may you find joy in discovering your own wisdom.
Until next time, keep exploring.
It's incredible how Rumi's teachings still speak to us, even after all these centuries. His message of love, presence, gratitude, it's so inspiring, so relevant to our lives today.
It really is. It speaks to something so deep within us, something universal, timeless. It's like he's tapping into this ancient well of wisdom that's always been there.
We've talked about how words sometimes aren't enough, how even a master like Rumi recognized that. You said earlier his pen name, Silence, points to a deeper understanding. But how can silence be a path to understanding, especially when we're trying to grasp something as profound as a mystical experience?
That's a great question, and it goes to the very core of Rumi's message. You see, both Dr. Dinani and Dr. Larajani are very clear that Rumi's silence isn't about just not talking. It's about cultivating a stillness inside, a receptivity to something that goes beyond words. It's about quieting the mind, making space for a different kind of knowing.
So it's not about withdrawing from the world, becoming a hermit. It's about creating a space within ourselves to experience the world more fully, more deeply.
That's a beautiful way to put it. It's about shifting from doing to being, from the noise outside to the wisdom within. And in that stillness, we can connect with our true selves, with the divine, with the interconnectedness of everything.
It makes me think of that story Dr. Danny told about the king who asked his wise men for something to make him happy when sad and sad when happy. And they gave him a ring that said, "This too shall pass."
Such a powerful reminder of impermanence, right? And cultivating silence helps us remember that, not get swept away by the ups and downs, but to find that peaceful center within.
Like finding the eye of the hurricane, that quiet space in the middle of the storm.
Exactly. And that's where we connect with our true selves, with the divine, with that sense of unity, with everything.
You know, thinking about silence this way, it's not an absence, it's a presence, a source of strength and wisdom. It's like Rumi is saying, quiet your mind, listen to your soul, and you'll find the answers you're looking for.
I love that. And it's something we can practice every day, whether it's through meditation, spending time in nature, or even just taking a few deep breaths to calm the mind. We can all create space for silence and tap into that wisdom within us.
This has been such an enriching deep dive into Rumi's world. I feel like I have a whole new understanding of the power of language, the importance of intuition, and the transformative power of silence. But it's not just about knowing this stuff, it's about living it, letting it shape our thoughts, actions, how we interact with the world.
You got it. As you continue exploring Rumi, approach it with humility, openness, and a willingness to be transformed by his words. Let yourself be swept away by his love, his wisdom, his divine madness, and see where it takes you.
Well, this has been another incredible journey on Wisdom Unveiled, and it's left me feeling so inspired and ready to keep exploring Rumi's teachings.
That's fantastic. The journey is the destination, after all.
To all our listeners, may Rumi's words illuminate your path, and may you find joy in discovering your own inner wisdom. Until next time, keep exploring.
Keep exploring.